Hello, Professor
Hello.
Milton.
Hi. Nice
Hi,
to meet you.
nice to meet you too. How are you today, Professor Milton?
Oh, you can call me Amy. Yeah, I'm absolutely fine, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, I also absolutely fine, doing fine. Yeah.
Excellent. So how can I help today?
So I just wanna I I just wanna ask something related to my
Hmm.
project, and then
Yep.
uh, maybe I to give some presentation
Hmm.
overview of my project. So to
Yep.
give it a clear context, and then Professor Milton can give me a feedback and something like Q&A and open discussion, like like this.
Okay, that
Yeah,
sounds great.
yeah. Uh, can we to I give it to my friends
Hmm.
as a interpreter and moderator, so the discussion can do it well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Let
Uh,
me just make sure that you can share your screen in this meeting. Zoom's changed, so I'm just figuring out how to do that.
yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
hi.
Hello. Can
Hi.
my voice be heard?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Hello. Good morning, Professor Amy.
Yep, you can just call me Amy. That's fine.
Okay. So, with your permissions, I will be the moderator for today's sessions, and we
Yep.
will start with the short presentations to
Yep.
provide some context for the projects,
Yep.
as Brian said, and finally, we will conclude with some closing statements at the end, and of course, with a brief documentations. Would that be all right?
Yep, that's fine. Are you able
Yeah.
to share your screen? I'm just working out if I have to give you permission, but perhaps try and see. And if you
Yes.
can't, I'll try and work out how to make that work.
Yeah.
Yes. Brian will share screen soon. And okay, shall we begin?
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. So, uh, please, good morning, Amy, and it is a pleasure to meet you. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. It is an honor to have you with us from Cambridge University. So, how have you been recently, Amy?
Yep, very well, thank you.
Okay, that's great to hear. We've been really looking forward to these discussions. And before we begin, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Olivia Apeliani. I'm a college of Cahaya Bryant, and I will be the moderator for today's sessions. And I will also assist with interpretations if needed during the discussions. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Cahaya Bryant, who organized today's sessions and will be leading the presentations. So, Brian, please, I give it to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Olivia. Before that, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time to meet with us today. I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss my project with you. Uh, After our long discussion through email, we can finally meet and make this happen. I'm really happy about that, and it's such an honor to for me to meet a professor like you. So let me introduce myself first. My name is
Thank
Chaya.
you.
My name is Chaya Brian. I work mainly as a visual artist, including graphic design and illustration. Recently, I've also developed a strong interest in storytelling and writing, and I'm currently developing a story
Mhm.
project, and it's called Serial Limina. And okay, that's my short introduction of myself, and I give it back to Olivia.
Okay, thank you, Brian. And so now we will move on to the presentation sessions, which will be led by Brian, of course. And Professor, if you have any thoughts during the presentations, feel free to interrupt at any time. Okay, so Brian, would you like to begin?
Yeah, I have to share screen my PowerPoint. Yeah.
You can try.
Mm-hmm.
So let me know if the slides are visible.
Yep, I can see them.
Okay. Uh, so if it's alright with you, I would like to briefly present the concept of the story, particularly the idea of a sci-fi technology, and explore whether the concept could have a plausible scientific basis from your field of expertise. I would also love to hear your thoughts and regarding some psychological aspect related to the characters. So first I will explain the concept and some key elements of the story. After that I may ask several questions related to the concept, and I would greatly appreciate your insights. And of course, I would be very happy to have an open discussion as well. So I will start with a brief overview of the project, and please note that this is a fictional project, but I hope to build it with some grounding in real science. So the whole project actually started from simple questions. What if we could edit memory? Not by erasing events or simply changing how we feel about them, but by completely rewriting the sequence of events themselves. That's the main idea behind my story, Serial Limina. So this is, I got this inspiration on your speech on TED Talk, which is you talking about edit memories, and then I really interesting on that topic. So I developing this story based on that idea. Let me briefly explain what Serial Limina is about. So Serial Limina is a fictional narrative inspired by research related to episodic memory, and the story explores the idea that certain traumatic memory might not only be remembered, but could potentially be altered or reconstructed through advanced technology. In terms of genre, the story combines mystery, psychological drama, and science fiction. The story mainly explores themes such as memory reconstruction, identity, existential, and how trauma shapes our perception of reality. One reference people often think about is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which focuses on erasing memory. However, in Serial Limina, the concept is a bit different. The technology is not meant to delete specific memories, but rather to edit an entire memory event, particularly traumatic ones. This modification can also affect other related memories, creating something like a domino effect. In a way, it results in an updated version of the original memory after it has been edited. For example, I use a simple analogy of an ice cream, and this analogy is also inspired by your topic about the memory reconsolidations, and then I break down and make a difference between the science and my fictional project. So based on my understanding in conventional psychology, the event itself remains the same. The ice cream falls, and the emotional response is gradually reshaped. At first, it feels disappointing, but over time, it becomes easier to accept, and we can learn based on that events to the future. The memory is preserved, only its emotional weight is changed. In contrast, the technology in serial limina operates on a different premise. The original memory where the ice cream falls and sadness follows is overridden with an alternative sequence in which the ice cream never falls, is eaten, and the experience becomes joyful. This creates a fundamentally different outcome in how the memory is experienced and integrated. Building on that idea and to provide a clearer context, let me introduce the protagonist and the technology in serial limina. Aruta, the protagonist, is a 23-year-old who is driven by unresolved trauma and a desire to re-experience and rewrite his past into a happier and more idealist version. To achieve this, he used a technology called NeuraMed. NeuraMed is a speculative neuropsychotherapy device designed to modify autobiographical memory, particularly episodic memory, through a controlled reconsolidation process. In doing so, he is not only changing his memory, but potentially reshaping his identity. In this next section, I will show how the prototype, how the NeuraMed system works. So this is a flow chart illustrating how the NeuraMed system works, and let me walk you through it briefly. On the left side is the past where the original memory is formed, in this case when Aruta was 14 years old. On the right side is the present, his current reality at 23, where he chose to undergo this procedure. Once NeuraMed is activated, the subject enters a sleep-like state, allowing access to subconscious memory process. First, the system identifies a target memory, usually a traumatic event. In this case, it's a memory from when Aruta was 14 years old. Then the memory is reactivated, making it temporarily unstable and open to modifications. This is the controlled reconsolidation phase. At this point, the system initiates what I call mental time travel. It's not literal time travel, but more like Aruta experienced the memory as if he were back in that moment. Almost like his consciousness is reliving his past self. This is actually the same as bringing Aruta's soul back to the past when he was 14 years old. And from there, the override process begins. So the system starts to align the memory with a new version of events following the experience that Aruta goes through in that reconstructed timeline. So it's synchronized. It could be said that the original memory doesn't disappear immediately. Instead, it becomes what I describe as a residual memory, like noise or glitch, that still lingers. The more the new version is reinforced, the more the original memory fades. This indicates a successful memory revive. If the process is successful, the system checks whether the new memory encoding persists. If it does, the system may enter an auto mode, where the change begin to influence other memory over time. This creates a broader effect where even unrelated memories might gradually adjust to align with the newly constructed versions, ultimately leading to change in the subject's sense of identity. So, but what if it fails, either during overwriting or encoding? That's the most crucial thing, because if it fails, memory will become distorted and cause chaos. All memory can melt, even other type of memory. In that situation, the only really dangerous thing is that the system may require a forced shutdown, such as a reset or memory deletion. That's why Neuromed is also facing a moral and ethical dilemma, which will be one of the conflicts of the story.
Mhm.
And next, I would like to explain the key differences between the scientific reference and the fictional concept of the Neuromed. In other words, this concept is an extrapolation based on existing research on memory and reconsolidations. Because my goal is not to make it fully realistic, but to make it feel scientifically plausible and believable as a sci-fi concept. I would also like to mention that my understanding is still quite limited, as I come from a non-scientific background. This concept is based on the best research and interpretations I could do so far. So I would really appreciate your feedback and correction if there are any misunderstanding in how I approach these ideas. So here are the 5 key uh, differences. First, in current science, memory consolidations happens naturally and it's not fully controllable. But in Neuromed, I extend this idea into a controlled process where the system can intentionally guide how the memory is reconstructed. Second, scientifically, what can be modified is mostly the emotional response associated with a memory. In this concept, I expand that into editing the narrative structure itself, changing what actually happens in the memory. Third, in reality, the core facts of memory tend to remain stable, but in the Neuromed, even the perceived facts, such as events, roles, and causality, can be altered. Fourth, in psychology, memory modification usually happens through therapeutic process. In this concept, it is translated into a speculative neurotechnology that directly intervenes in memory processing. Fifth, in real-world setting, the goal is usually adaptive regulations, helping individuals cope better. In contrast, Neuromed pushes this into a more extreme directions, where the process can become high risk and potentially destabilize identity. So that's how I try to position the concept between science and fiction. I would really appreciate your perspective on this, and I love open to discussion from here. Okay, so that's the brief presentation from me, and I give it back to Olivia. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentations, Brian. And Amy, we would be happy to hear your thoughts or any questions you may have. Please, over to you.
So I think this sounds really exciting, and I think that you've done a really good job. I know you said you don't have a scientific background, but I think you've done a really good job at getting the core parts of the science right, and taking that in a good fictional direction. So I think you actually have got the core concepts here. So hopefully that's reassuring. I think this sounds like it will be a really good project. There are a couple of things that I thought of that might be helpful if you haven't come across them already. But otherwise, these are just my thoughts. I think the idea of the Neuromed and how that works is really good, and I can see where this could go in really interesting narrative places. There were two things that I thought of that might be of particular interest. So one is there is a therapeutic approach to trauma called imagery rescripting, and that is where the therapist gets the person with trauma to think about the past event and tries to get them to sort of generate alternate endings to that event. So it's like an imagined version of what you're saying, with the key difference, of course, being that the person who's undergoing therapy knows it's imagined and they are like rescripting, but they know it's an imagined alternative event, not overwriting the original memory. But if that's helpful, you could imagine how this might have come out of a combination of imagery rescripting and the reconsolidation work to be like the new technology. So that might be helpful. The other thing, if you haven't come across it already, is Elizabeth Loftus's work on updating of episodic memories, or it's really misinformation. And she has some really interesting, it's all psychological work, so there's no neuroscience basis to it, but you can see there might be a neuroscience basis to it, where she finds there's quite a lot of variability in how people are susceptible to the misinformation. But for some people, she finds that misinforming them about a single event. So the kinds of experiments she does is she gets people into the lab, she talks to their families and gets sort of 3 memories that actually happened to them when they were under the age of 10, and then she presents them with these 3 events, but also a 4th one that she's made up. And she says, your family told me about this, they told me about that. And then what she tends to see is that for the made-up event, some people will then start to have memories of that made-up event, and they will start to then reconstruct details that were never there. She's even gone so far as to get people to remember meeting Bugs Bunny at Disneyland. And of course, Bugs Bunny's a Warner Brothers character, so that never happened. But some people, not everyone, but some people will then generate these really rich episodic memories out of that. So actually, I think your Neuromed system actually is quite close to what is there in the literature. If you imagine it sort of taken out 50 years from now and commercialised and perhaps not in everybody's best interest, then you could see that I think it would actually work like pretty much as you said. So I think you've done a really good job on getting that set up.
Oh.
Those are my initial thoughts.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, that's a very insightful for this project. And actually, I once heard Elizabeth Loftus, and I once heard her TED Talks, and once she speaking on there, and that's a really interesting topic too. And I want to do research again for that topic. Yeah.
Okay, so shall we move to the Q&A sessions, perhaps? Okay, so Brian will begin with a few questions to you, Amy, and we would also welcome any feedback or insights you'd like to share. Okay, so please, Brian, let us hear.
Okay, thank you very much, Olivia. I wanna ask questions, and first, from a scientific perspective, how plausible is the idea of editing an entire memory event rather than just altering its emotional response?
So I think it would not be impossible. It would be tricky, but for a fictional story, that's fine because presumably someone solved that. I think what you would probably need, so thinking of Elizabeth Loftus's work, it might be possible to take some core component of that memory and change that one piece, which then has that kind of domino effect, as you said, on the other parts of the memory. So one of the first experiments that Elizabeth Loftus did was the one with the cars going into each other. So she showed people a clip of two cars, a minor car accident basically, having a bit of a bump. And then she found that when she asked people how fast were the cars going when they made contact, or how fast were they going when they smashed into each other, the estimate of the speed was different. And that one thing then led to people misremembering broken glass if they had remembered that the cars were going faster. So if you had one core part of the memory that was changed, like as the procedure, so I don't know like whether this is you get the character to have like, you know, a key object from that memory, or they're presented with, they're taken back to a place, or exactly how you do it narratively. But one core part of that memory, which then changing that changes everything else in the event. That I think is not possible now, but would be plausible as a science fiction idea.
Okay, that's actually give me a new perspective on okay, so the second question is, could modifying one memory realistically influence other memories, even those that seem unrelated?
In principle, it could. So the way that we think the memory lasts in the really long term, memories, particularly episodic memories, don't stay dependent on the hippocampus forever. After a couple of years, they seem to be supported by the cortex. There are a couple of different scientific views on why that is, but a major one that's got a lot of support behind it is known as either the multiple trace theory or the trace transformation theory. And the idea is that what we do is, for lots of similar episodes, we take out the key parts that are common across lots of episodes. So a classic example is like when you go to a restaurant, you tend to have the same kind of script for going into you go into the restaurant, you find a table, you order the food, you eat the food, so on. The idea is that those memories become stored outside of the hippocampus in the cortex, but in this really script-like way, and we then reconstruct those when we're retrieving that memory. So you take sort of, the people you were there with, so you sort of take the knowledge of those people, which restaurant it was, you take the knowledge of that, and then you rebuild the entire memory. So in principle, if you destabilise, again, parts of that understanding or sort of overlapping memories, you could then have a sort of domino effect on other memories. And because we then reconstruct, that could then have lots of effects subsequently. Again, thinking back to sort of the old literature on false memories, we know, for example, there's lots of evidence where if people have watched, there's kind of like flashbulb memories, so it's things like hearing about 9/11 or, big disasters. People will often remember hearing about that, like getting that news, by seeing it on the TV, because they see the images of like the planes hitting the twin towers, and they say that's how I got the news, even if that wasn't actually how they did it. There's a study that was done just after the Challenger disaster in the 80s, where just literally like the same day that happened, there were psychologists going and interviewing the undergraduates. How did you hear? They waited a couple of years, came back and said, how did you hear? And the memories had completely changed. because having that idea that you have to have the visual image that they'd seen later come into the how you got the news then meant that whole memory got rewritten, because that one thing had to then fit, so you rebuild it in an incorrect way. So in theory, yes, sorry, that's a very long answer. That one, changing one part could have an effect on other memories as well.
Okay, I hadn't thought about it that way before, so this is very insightful for me. And then the third questions: what potential psychological risk might arise from reconstructing autobiographical memory in this way, and maybe in memory reconsolidation itself?
So I suppose in terms of risks, you have a couple of things. One would be if your character has their past rewritten, and that's only rewritten in their head. Of course, you have external reality, right? So if they encounter something that they should be aware of that they're now not aware of, that's going to be very confusing. And I'm guessing this is probably where you're going with the narrative. So, like, how do they manage that? The other thing that could potentially be, so there is an idea at the moment that. So a lot of people talk about, for example, post-traumatic growth. So nobody wants PTSD. I mean, PTSD is horrible, but there are people who then find meaning in that trauma by the way in which they react to it. So people might, for example, do charity work or help other people with PTSD. There's lots of things that people do to try to make meaning of the trauma that they experienced. It also means that people, particularly for early life trauma, there is some evidence that restricted early life trauma, not anything too bad, but a little bit of adversity when you're young is actually quite good at making you resilient later on and teaching you how to sort of cope within certain limits. So a little bit of adversity is good, but too much, like trauma levels of adversity is not. So I guess there would potentially be a risk that people wouldn't, your person with their rewritten memories wouldn't necessarily have the coping strategy. They wouldn't need the coping strategies because they don't need them now because it never happened in their head. So they might lose that. And then I guess the final risk is what happens if the machine goes wrong, like you said. So if it ends up completely rewriting things, or it has to do this forced shutdown, like what happens in terms of that memory if it's completely lost. So I guess, those are probably my initial thoughts on the risks.
Yeah, thank you so much. And the next question is, are there existing theories or research that related to this kind of memory manipulations?
For episodic memory, I think, so Peggy St. Jacks has done a little bit of work on that. There she has been doing things like she gets people to wear like a GoPro around their neck and look around a museum, and then she targets particular parts of that, and it's really kind of introducing misinformation. So it's, for episodic memories, it looks more like people remember those differently rather than them disappearing completely. So I think the rewriting of the end is actually something that's quite plausible. There are other bits of work, I would need to check the authors, but there's lots of work around episodes and misremembering of episodes. So, for example, we tend to extend episodes to their natural beginning and natural conclusion. So if we just see part of a film clip, for example, like it might be someone kicking a ball at a goal. It's sort of often things like this. We don't actually see the ball go into the goal, But if we're then asked later, we will often then say, oh, yeah, they kicked the ball and then it went into the goal. So we remember seeing bits that we didn't because that's kind of the natural end to that episode. So there is plenty of evidence, I think, that the brain is reconstructing and rebuilding memories when we're retrieving them. So the idea that you could change how that is being done, I think, is quite scientifically plausible.
Okay, so that's give me insight again for this research and topic that I never done before.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question is, I also have a concern regarding the ethical aspect of this concept, since it involves trauma and psychological experience.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes wonder whether the ideas might be too speculative or potentially sensitive. Do you think this concept is still within a safe and respectful boundary? I've tried to do some research to approach it carefully, but I would really appreciate your perspective on this.
So I think you wouldn't be the first person to imagine what happens if you start to edit memories. Because I think, yeah, like you said, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind explored this space. And I think, yeah, I don't think it is like ethically, like as a work of science fiction, I don't think it's kind of ethically out there. I think people would find it really interesting. So yeah, so no, I think you're fine.
Okay, that's what I looking for, because I sometimes I wondering that my concept is too sensitive or maybe not respectful for the survivors, and yeah, and I just want to make a clarify to you, so I can give a idea again for that works.
Yeah. I mean, if you're really worried about that, maybe you could try to find some people with lived experience of trauma, and you could ask them for their opinions. So once you've got kind of the narrative or sort of more of the narrative worked out, particularly with respect to the trauma, if there are any charities or anybody who speaks openly about their lived experience of PTSD, you could talk to them and then see how they react to it and see whether they consider it to be an appropriate treatment of it. They will also be able to give you more insight into what it's like to live with PTSD, which then might also be helpful for you in the representation of the character.
Okay. Thank you very much for advice and insight. That. Okay, so I give it back to Olivia for the next sessions.
Okay, thank you so much, Amy and Brian. So now is the open discussion sessions. Perhaps Brian will want to start with some topic. I will give it to you.
Just wait a minute. I think this is the very last question for me. And where do you see the future of memory research heading in the next decade? Yeah.
So I think the way that I'm thinking about it now is that what we are missing in the reconsolidation field is essentially the understanding of when the memory, like how to reliably predict when the memory becomes unstable outside of a lab setting. So we're quite good when we know exactly what's been learned and when it's been learned and how long ago it was learned. So we're quite good at working with that, but what we don't yet have is a really good understanding for people who are out there having different experiences and individual experiences. How do we then take that and then work out how to design the session that would then make the memory unstable? So I think what we're missing is some theoretical work around that. So that's something we're really interested in doing. We're trying to get funding to do that. We will find out if that happens. But that's where I think we need to go. Because I think if we could, that's kind of one approach that would be really helpful. Because if we were able to predict for this experience this long ago, this experience of this intensity this long ago, this is how we intervene, this is how we can be helpful. That would be ideal, to having that prediction. The other thing that I think would be very helpful would be to have some kind of a marker that the memory is unstable. And it would need to be non-invasive. So we're probably looking at something like an EEG, you know, these sort of electrode nets that get put over the head. Some kind of signature that could then be measured in real time to say the memory is now unstable. And if you have both of those, you could then use your prediction and then double check and then make your intervention. That's probably more than 10 years of work, but that's where I think that's the direction I think we need to go in. That's I think where the field needs to head. I suppose the other thing is working on how, what do you do once you have that memory in an unstable state? So do you try to give a drug to try to block the reconsolidation of that memory? And if so, which drug do you use? Because it has to be safe for use in humans. You have to be able to give it as a pill or an injection or, a nasal spray or something like that. Or is it better to do these kind of behavioural interventions, so like the Tetris intervention that we've used in the past, or introducing new information, so it's kind of those two things. I think, how do you make the memory unstable, and once you've got it unstable, what's the optimal way to treat that minimises any risk for the patient but also maximises the benefit?
That's a really, really interesting topic that I really looking forward to this process of the research at the next future. And that's a question from me, and I give it back to Olivia.
Okay, thank you so much for the explanations, Amy and also Brian. So before we end these sessions, perhaps Amy, do you have any questions for Brian?
I don't think so. I think you presented it really well. I'd love you to keep me updated as you develop the idea. I'd love to sort of see how it all turns out, because I think it sounds really exciting. I think people would really enjoy it. So please keep me updated, I think is what I'm saying.
Yeah, of course. I also hopefully when this project is finished, I can say that this was partly inspired by your input today, because you're the person who made me a major inspiration to making this project. So I will give it update for you. That's
great. Thank you, and good luck with it. It sounds like a really exciting project.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so before we conclude, may I ask if there are any final statements from you, Amy, and from Brian too, please?
So from me, yes, just keep me updated. I want to see how this develops.
Okay. So for me, I think that's all from my side for today, and I really uh, gaining some new insight from Professor Amy, and of course that's give me very. I really have a new perspective on this topic. So this discussion has been very insightful and really helpful for developing my project. And thank you very much for taking the time to discuss this with me. I truly appreciate your insight and your willingness to share your expertise. And maybe one day, if this project turns out well, I'll have to credit you as part of the inspirations. And thank you again, Professor. It was really an honor to speak with you, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. It was really nice to meet you both.
Yeah.
And good luck with it all.
Okay, so for now, may we take a quick screenshot for the documentations?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, please. I will count until 3.
Okay.
Be ready.
Mhm.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's good.
Okay, that's
Like this.
good.
Okay, once again, Professor Amy, we truly appreciate your time and your valuable insights. It has been a very meaningful discussion for us. And thank you very much. We hope we can stay in touch in the future. And
Great.
have a wonderful
Thank
day.
you. You too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay.
Goodbye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Okay. Goodbye. Thank you so much.